All right, we're live.
Y'all ready for this one? It's time. It's rapid fire. 32 bars of fire, part 5. Let's get it. All praise to my Lord and my Savior, Jesus
Back with a
Christ.
brand new break, we stand true. Been it for breaking just like I'm bamboo. There ain't nothing that my guy can't do. Following the Peter, jump without a new Andrew. Represent the Holy One, the little one. But I know that you've been feeling like you're running on the one. He gave up his only son. Look at the back of the book, you know we won. Never distracted, running galactic. Everything we got to the world impacting. The word of the sheep will never set on defeat. He's on my feet with that anaphylactic shock it off. He's an awesome God. River Daniel Langs did locking jaws. Thinking no way coming straight up out of Arkansas. Holy Ghost on the move is a phenomenon.
You came from.
Still repping Christ. Dead come to life. Dead in a moment, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, we're gonna pop out. Still repping Christ. Dead come to life. Dead in a moment, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, we're gonna pop out. Still repping Christ. Dead come to life. Dead in a moment, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, we're gonna pop out. Still repping Christ. All praise to the Messiah. Dead in a moment, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, with a rapid fire.
Hi, Ron.
Here, all right, here we are. We're back from the dead, coming back with the Reverend Ron Revelation Room. I'm a big fan of things coming back to life, so I'm gonna bring
That was
it
a
back.
great tweet.
We're back here again, starting what I'm calling season 2. We've got Dean back with us,
Thank you, Ron.
or otherwise known in the Twitter sphere as London Theist,
Yeah.
the terror of all heresies. But welcome, Dean from across the pond.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for having me back on again. And it's a privilege to be the first episode again on this time on season 2. And yeah, we've
Yeah.
discussed having a chat for a while now, and we finally made it happen now. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Things just kind of ebb and flow in life, and I just hadn't been in the right place to do much of this stuff. But I recently got back into some different interactions that I hadn't been doing for a while, and I guess it's appropriate to call this season 2 because it's almost been literally a year since
Yeah.
I did my first 5 videos. And anyways, I've gotten back to some interaction with non-believers online, which I hadn't been doing. And that got me to thinking maybe it's time to bring this back, because I want to have conversations, but not just conversations with Christians. Like I said, I want to have a conversation style. I'm a Christian who has a YouTube channel, not a Christian YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And anyways, so I started having some conversations, and they went well on my end anyways, so I thought, maybe I'm ready to give this a go again. I feel like I'm in the right spot.
Yeah.
And so how have you been? It's been a year. You staying, have you been changing anything, the way you interact on the internet since last time we spoke?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've been on the Twitter London Theist a couple of years now, and the first year it was mostly just getting in arguments daily with atheists and getting really wound up with all these Atheist Republic and Paul Ogier and anyone who tweets anything, and just trying to answer back as many people as I could. But it's not fruitful. It's not the fruits of the spirit, and it doesn't bring me joy. It brings me frustration. It's not what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do, and what I have been doing more, is quoting like the church fathers, like some of their tweets. So if you notice, if you follow my tweets the last 6 months or so, I've been quoting a lot of trying to be positive quotes, like how Metatona sort of does, our friend on Twitter, just trying to put out godly quotes and Bible verses, encouragement as well as writing stuff, like sometimes answering atheists, or if I feel there's a good point, I'll in a book I'll read, like apologetics book or theology book or philosophy, I'll write the tweet there. But I'm trying not to argue, and in terms of YouTube channels, I don't really go on a lot, but you, Critical Witness guys, and Eric, I've had good chats with recently, and I just want to, when I have chats like this, especially, I just want to be open and myself, and I don't want to go into a chat and have debates. And even I spoke to JB before, who's an atheist, and that's a nice open conversation, and I enjoy that. It's I don't want to be going on the internet getting into arguments. You know, it's not good. It doesn't lead anywhere for most of the time. It's too much, especially with the anti-theists. They've got their way. They're very indoctrinated. They say we're indoctrinated, but we might touch on that because of your tweets recently, like how they will push aside the truth even if it points that way, to deny Jesus existed or deny. That's an example. Like they will go above and beyond to just prove that there was never a historical Jesus. So I just don't tend to get into them arguments anymore. On Twitter, I have my page which I quote and put tweets on, but I also have the groups which I'm in a few with you, and it's just motivation and just Christian fellowship, and I find that really encouraging because I think I mentioned in the past before, I have my church which I go, but throughout the week I'm surrounded by atheist agnostics and constantly still where I'm not getting the fellowship I need in sense, and it's good to have Twitter. Twitter's a blessing for that, and meeting great people like Jansen and co. So I'm truly blessed for that side of Twitter.
Yeah, you know, Twitter is largely a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to find a dumpster fire anywhere all over Twitter. But the thing is you can allow Twitter to use you, or you can use Twitter.
Yeah.
So you can chase around Twitter and find and see all the outrage porn and dumpster fires, or you can build incredible communities of people and have incredible conversations on Twitter that you just can't find anywhere else. I mean, or it's hard to find anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know, especially I'm from rural Arkansas, and there's just not that many people, much less the kind of people that it's just it's extraordinarily hard to find that kind of interaction with so many people in rural Arkansas. You know, you might because it's going to be a certain subset of a certain subset of a certain subset of people that you're going to have that kind of connections with.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things about Twitter is Twitter can be an absolute garbage fire, or it can be an absolute blessing that is edifying, and you can build wonderful communities. And it's just how you're going to use it. So you can let social media use you, or you can use social media.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Completely.
And
I've learned that the hard way, maybe over the first year, and now I'm much better at it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had that same thing with interacting with atheists or anti-theists or others. You know, sometimes I'm much better at it now, but sometimes I'll just troll. Yeah, honestly, I just want to provoke somebody.
Yeah.
And sometimes, but I've gotten a lot better. And my interactions recently with some agnostics and atheists was a lot better, I thought, at least on my end. So that's what kind of reminded me of this channel. And hey, you know what? I want to have good conversations with people, and let's have real conversations. Let's not rehash these old, tired, early 2000 new atheist conversations and stuff, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
And so, hey, we got 3 watchers, so.
Oh, that's cool.
Recently, the Non Sequitur show was I should know these names. Chesh, I think it is, and Steve, can't remember his name offhand, his last name. Steve.
Ray, is it? McRae or Ray?
McRae, I think, yeah.
McRae.
They revived the Non Sequitur show.
Yeah.
which and they had a debate with S.J. Thompson and Craig Reed versus Jim Majors about comparing atheism as a rule of society versus Christianity.
Yeah.
And it was a rough start for New Sequitur, so I'm sure they'll do a lot better. But the hosts, and they know this, they talk too much. It wasn't so much between the participants as it was the hosts leading the whole conversation.
Did they intervene in the debate? What through their talking, kind of? Did they pick a side, or?
Well, they just kind of, how would you say? They were obviously of an opinion, but especially the last half hour, I thought went really poorly, because it basically went to Steve, Chesh, and Jim grilling SJ, because Craig was having some internet issues and stuff. And there's a lot of that tired old conversation that showed up in that, and I didn't care for much how that went. I didn't think it was well done.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right to me.
And I mean, they weren't attacking SJ, but it was like there was a lot of the arguments or the statements where a lot of this, early 2000 new atheist kind of comments about Christianity and obvious truths that are supposed to be about how Christianity isn't good, and it just wasn't well done, because the hosts were talking too much about it, and there was too much meandering in the conversation and not enough focus. To me, hanging threads. It would just be like a comment, and then you try to start into that topic, and then it's like over here to another topic, and then over here to another topic, and
So
all these threads are.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, you have all these hanging threads, and the conversation just kind of flowing. And it was supposed to be, well, here was my objection with it. It's supposed to be a comparative argument, right? Atheist versus Christian as a world view is what they were basically getting at. But I don't like that as a comparative argument, and this is why kind of got me back into interacting with atheists more. And recently, is atheism and Christianity isn't a comparative argument, because atheism is an argument concerning theism, right? It's atheist or theist.
Yeah.
And then Christianity is downstream from theism.
Yeah.
So it's not apples to apples, is my point, is I was trying to make it. Say atheism versus Christianity is not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
Because, and what happens a lot with that comparison is, say the Christian tries to make a critical point of atheism, and then the atheist says, well, atheism is just not belief in God, But then the Christian could be criticized by the atheist, because Christianity is a very specific, defined set of beliefs and group of people.
Within theism, yeah.
Yeah. So Christianity is a defined, specific, confessed beliefs and views, whereas atheism is this amorphous, base level thing that's not defined. So it's not apples to apples.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the analogies I used was to use a comparative argument between atheism and Christianity is like having an archery match between the participants, and the atheist and the Christian are in an arena, and there's the Christian target that they can shoot at, right? They can shoot their bow at.
Yeah.
Well, the atheist target is in a whole nother arena. So you can't hit it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not talking about the same thing, is my point.
Yeah, I see where you're
So
coming.
if you're going to try and compare Christianity with atheism, it's not a proper discussion, comparative discussion. Atheism and theism is, but atheism and Christianity isn't, because you're using Christianity is downstream from atheism or theism.
Yeah,
And it's a defined target that you're talking about. Whereas atheism is not a defined target, it's a base level statement or belief, or not
Yeah.
belief or whatever you want. So that's one of the things that I think goes awry with these conversations with atheists and Christians. Because with Christianity, right, you can say, well, Christians led to the Spanish Inquisition, right? Which is obviously, that's a true statement, right? Okay. But then you try to say, well, I think we can see a direct path from atheism to Soviet Russia and the gulags.
Yeah.
But then they can say, well, because they're not atheist, or atheism is just not a belief in God. And it's not a defined set of beliefs. Okay. So what can I do? I mean, I can't criticize your position because all you can say is, catch me if you can. His way one person put it, I thought that was accurate. They play catch me as you can, if you can. You can't pin them down on criticism. Yeah. But you can a Christian because they have a defined specific belief.
So let me, on that topic, because I was just reading this today. So we both follow, JB, the atheist, and I've talked to him, really nice guy. But so the non-alchemist is wanting to debate Cameron from Capturing Christianity, but Cameron doesn't want to debate Christianity. He wants to keep it to theism, atheism, because of the reasons what you've been explaining. JB comments, Christians, please come to these debates and discussions with your actual views of reality. If all you believe in is theism, then debate that. But if you believe Christianity, then debate that. So he's pushing back to your point by saying, well, no, because you're not just theist, you believe specifically in Christianity, which is true. But like what you're saying, you're making the Christian, the theist, go down to Christianity, like you said, but the archery thing's brilliant. Just use that target, while the atheist can just sit back. No, that doesn't apply to us. Stalin doesn't apply to us.
Yeah,
none of that applies.
You've missed my target. Well, because it's over in this whole other arena. I can't even hit it.
No, but what is there like that? And then to press them, they don't like when we don't get specific to the point where just defend Christianity. Well, then tell me your worldview. That's how I see what you're saying and how I agree, how I approach it. Well, let's look at even what your worldview versus my worldview, and let's look at the strengths and weaknesses of both, analyze as a cumulative case, and let's see where we come up. But because, like you said, you can't just we're not going to just go on a show, which it seems like the non sequitur one was, where Craig and SJ are having to defend their faith just from everyone, from the host and from everyone. Is just attacked straight at Christianity, where we need a comparison. It needs to be moderated better than that, and that's what I haven't seen it, but that's what you're saying seems to be.
Well, and particularly this is supposed to be a versus argument, a comparative argument, right?
Yeah.
But that was my main point, responding to it. And the thing that got me thinking maybe I should start this back up is I got pressed on it by a lot of people, and I felt like I've handled myself well. And I had a couple of other interactions with non-believers, and throughout it all, I never lost my peace. I never got frustrated, and I never turned to ad hominems or insults. Good. So I thought maybe I can get back to doing this, because I do want to have dialogue, true dialogue with people, conversations with different people who believe differently than I do, and let's have a conversation in good faith and communication when listening to one another, and see where, even to a large degree, even non-believers and believers will have probably more in common than they don't.
Yeah.
Or most of the time, but and that was my specific point about that. Is this is supposed to be a comparison, but we're setting up an apples and oranges comparison. And what I got asked, what would be more proper comparison, and was like, if you want to do Christianity, you need to compare it to something more specific, a worldview that's downstream from just atheism, like secular humanism or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say atheism versus Christianity and have an apples to apples comparison. You say Islam to Christianity, or Buddhism to Christianity, or
Exactly.
secular humanism to Christianity. That's a comparison of worldviews, because Christianity is a worldview, it's not a basic belief.
Yeah. So, tying in on this, I was out with my friends at work who are all atheists. Well, they claim to be atheists, and we was out at the pub just after work last week, and the conversation, I could hear them talking because I was at the other end of the table by my boss and someone else, and they was really attacking Catholicism. He said I was raised Catholic, and they were calling it a cult, and I could hear them doing all the, like you said, the 2000 new atheist jibes and everything. But then I could hear them also when I sort of got involved and talked a bit. They sort of talked about consciousness, and well, I can't explain that because they're coming from a very scientific understanding how they were talking. And as you sort of press them on little things and get them away from just the ad hominem attacks on Catholicism or priests or whatever scandal they want to bring up, you get them to the point where, well, yeah, I believe in the human, even one of them, I believe in the human soul, like the consciousness. My wife's a doctor. When someone dies, that you can't see it just leaving them, can you? So that they were talking. So basically, it was just tying in with, when you pressed him on his worldview, it wasn't strictly materialistic. It was also, he was talking about like fate, and he was talking about consciousness. He was talking about morality. And I said, can you see what you're doing? You're grounding being the same way a theist does, like I would do, but you're using the morality is moral realism. You're talking about consciousness. The mind is essential, ontological. You're talking about you're grounding everything in this way with all these facts. But yeah, you can attack certain aspects of a religion and scandals, of course, but you're doing it from a moral standpoint. You're talking about consciousness, talking about, and even one of them talked about he could understand religious experiences and things like that. So when you really, and that's what I love, when I could have that sort of conversation with really strong atheists, and then you draw them into it, and then you say, we're not that different after all, because you believe a lot of what I believe, but you're just not getting it right yet, and you're not got the revelation right yet, kind of, you could say that. But I didn't want to press them much, but I was just letting them get away from these attacks. So let's talk sensibly. And I was quite happy I had that conversation and how that went, because in the past I probably would have got defensive and said, well, Stalin done this, and atheism, it's not going to come productive, and talk about abortions, or it's not going to work well if I argue like that. But if you try and find common ground and see what they hold to. Do they hold to consciousness and idealistic sort of ideas like Descartes? I think, therefore I am. The most fundamental thing anyone knows is that you personally exist right now. Do you see what I'm,
well, if you avoid going into solipsism.
But yeah, of course. But that's always a trick if you go too much philosophy, where you just can. But as Descartes said, that is the thing you're most sure of, and then that sort of follows with me with God. Well, God, because my mind's not going to be on its own. Like, there's going to be look how amazing this world is. The beauty, the contingency arguments, ontology. But it just, mind is essential, and that's how you can reason straight. You reason straight to God in quite quick steps. And that can be explained.
That seems to be the case to me, and there's I think a growing reason and evidence for that, because you can't do an experiment without an observer.
Yeah,
it can't be done. I mean, if you're doing an experiment, you're observing it.
Did you,
right? I mean, you can't remove the observer.
Jonathan Pajot was saying exactly what you were saying recently, and he was saying the problems with atheism, and that was the main thing he's talking about. You're observing. You're never neutral. He said the materialists like to think they're in it. They're in this experiment, and or it's just material. We're in it. No, but like you said, you're the observer. You're observing it. You've got your biases. You've got your views. You're there. It's you. That's the ultimate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've recently gotten into idealism, and particularly from Bernardo Castro's work,
Yeah.
but other bits as well. But and it's not that I can fully necessarily believe, or whatever, however you want to put that. Not that I'm fully subscribed to idealism. I see some very strong explanatory power, and Castro makes some very, very, very strong arguments.
Yeah.
And materialism has its problems. And if we can't be honest about that, or if people who are materialists can't be honest about that, it seems that consciousness is the ontological primitive. You can't seem to get past consciousness. And there's not, even from what I understand, at least in some interpretations of quantum mechanics, there doesn't seem to be any reality without consciousness. Right? And we can't know of a reality beyond consciousness or past consciousness, because we are conscious, and if we start interacting with reality, our conscious is interacting with reality. We can't get past that. We can't remove our conscience from the experiment or the observation. So it's not even clear that material truly exists without consciousness.
Did you watch the Jordan Peterson one when he talked to them two Catholic guys who wrote a book about him? It was only a couple
I have
of weeks.
not.
Oh, it's really good. And he says that the Catholic guys were talking about the Big Bang at the start, and then Peterson repeats what you said. He said it's not even clear
Yeah.
till we come along consciousness that anything's there, like that anything exists. Like, he was talking so much like an idealist, and he started to really talk like that, which I found has been an interesting twist. And he was arguing exactly the same way you did there, and I think he's come to that realization. And it's powerful, like crazy powerful, like quantum physics and the quantum realm, and I'm just touching on the surface of learning about idealism through Craig Reed has done a lot of stuff posting, so I've got into it through that, and I've seen some of the stuff you've said. But
it seems that consciousness is the irreducible beginning, because we can't get past it. I mean, anything we do, there's a conscious agent.
Yeah.
And of course, there are quantum experiences or experiments that show that all matter is a potential wave function until it's observed. It can be anything, anywhere, until it's observed, and then its position in time and space is set.
Yeah.
They've got the slit experiment and the double slit experiment, right? I'm not a quantum mechanic or a quantum physicist, right? But I'm not dumb. I can understand some things, and I'm not saying this is proof positive 100%. I'm just saying it's very fascinating, and I'm looking at where it points.
Yeah.
And so it's not I have heard recently Jordan say something like that, because I listened to the Joe Rogan conversation, and he did bring some of that up, but quantum physics seems to point to that all things are potential wave until it's observed, and then its position is set, right? But it's not just set at the point it's observed, it's set backwards in time at that moment. It's set, like the path that it took to get there is set from there all the way back. Right? So it's crazy. I mean,
that sounds crazy. Yeah, that sounds like
it does. That seems to be what
every sort of thing we think. Like, if you think as we're taught in schools and brought up materialistic thinking, it just seems to blow it apart. Like, all you preconceived and been taught and raised, it just doesn't make sense, does it? Of what?
And then Carlo Rovelli, he's big on quantum. How would you term it? Relative quantum mechanics, or I can't remember how you would exactly say that. But the thing is it's all things are relative. Everything's position is relative to everything else.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then you might have heard Craig go over this. Like, a desk isn't just a desk. I mean, it's not. You can't look. It's not necessarily. You can't test it and say this is a desk. It's a desk because it has relative position amongst in itself that forms a desk, sort of thing. You can't do an experiment to say this is a desk, right? Or a chair is a great one. Donaldson Pajot uses that. It's like a tree stump. Is it a chair? Well, if you sit on it, it's a chair. But what makes it a chair? It's just a tree stump. Right? It doesn't have legs. It doesn't have a back. It doesn't necessarily, it's not what we... But if you sit on it, if you use it as a chair, it's a chair.
Yeah.
But if you don't use it as a chair, it's just a tree stump.
So it's what we decide. It's like how we see the use.
Yeah. And it's something like that, and it's made up of its components, but it's not, and it's got symbolic to do with symbolism too. It's like a symbol is the thing, but it's not the thing directly. Right? So we all know, like, if a child draws a square box with a triangle on top of it, they're probably drawing a house. Yeah. Right? Well, that's not what your house looks like. It's not what my house looks like necessarily, but we can look at it and it's a symbol of a house. Yeah, so it is a house, but it isn't at the same time, right?
Yeah. It's the general representation of the house, isn't it? But
yeah. I'm meandering there, but
no, it's good. Man, Jonathan Pajot is fascinating. Like,
oh yeah.
You mentioned him probably a year or more ago, and I'd heard of him through Jordan Peterson, but I'd really dived into him about 6 months ago and really I'm still watching his stuff as it comes out. But he just unpackages things like you just never believe, like some of his symbolism and in the garden especially, and the way he plays out like Adam and Eve and how Jesus relates. It's crazy how deep he can think. Yeah,
and the thing about symbolism is largely our observation of and okay, so the map isn't the landscape, right? That's one way of putting it. Our observation of reality is a map, but it's not the actual thing itself necessarily. And I'm not articulating that well, but we don't necessarily have direct interaction with reality, do we? I mean, we perceive reality through our senses.
Yeah.
And our consciousness. We don't necessarily have direct access to what is, because we can't get past our consciousness. We can't remove our consciousness and just observe what is.
No. Just the term observe is implying consciousness. Like, we can't even speak neutrally.
No. And I noticed this. I was watching I think it was a live stream, and Pine Creek Doug was making an argument for scientific experiment, and I noticed he was doing that. He was thinking that he was making an argument for materialism, but he was talking about, if I run this experiment and I'm just, he's thinking just measuring the material object, and it's like, okay, but you're still the observer. You can't do it and not be an observer. There has to be an observer. You can't remove the observer in a scientific experiment.
Yeah.
So you can't get past it.
Yeah. And all observers have biases, etc.
Yeah.
You can taint certain scientific evidence or historical evidence, etc. So that's another part of the observation. But atheists sometimes feel, no, science is neutral. It says this is the facts. And it was like, well, yeah, but you're observing it that way. And another scientist might read the data differently. And
the data itself tells us nothing. It don't. We don't know anything until the data starts being interpreted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, so science is great. I mean, I'm not anti-science, of course. Science is great, but it only can talk about what is.
Yeah.
It can't talk about what ought to be or what should be or why necessarily.
Right.
And you know that's the main difference between a religious view and a non-religious view is ontology. Right? Or teleology. Like that there is purpose. That there's purpose. That's the main difference. Is a religious person sees the world through purpose and a non-religious person doesn't.
Yeah.
Essentially. That's the main difference. That's the foundational difference. But
And I think the smartest atheists, like real atheology people on Twitter like that, they see this. So what they do, they adapt it and say, well, you get them around philosophy papers where actually teleology, yeah, we know that's true, but there's a Platonic atheistic explanation for that. And moral realism, yeah, that's true. There's a Platonic, again, like atheistic. So the atheists have omitted so much of our worldview, moral realism, teleology, and everything. They adapt. Yeah, there could be this, there could be that. That because they know how strong of a argument it is. Do you see? They're taking the smarter atheists are joining. They're joining and they're coming over. They're realizing materialism can't explain everything. They realize science ain't perfect. You need philosophy. So that it's great to see there's a change. And Craig on his channel has been saying it quite often. The new atheist type are dying out because that change in recent decade is advancing at such a pace where if you want to still be an atheist, you have to put philosophy first. You have to come over and give us like moral realism, teleology, etc. So it's a massive shift that I'm noticing, and Craig's been noticing for a while on his channel. Yeah.
I think so too. I think we need to have real conversations, not just casual dismissals and straw men, stuff.
Yeah.
And back to a point concerning the non sequitur show recently is one of the many things that I had a problem with the way things went is, and this also actually speaks to what I'm saying about how atheist versus Christianity is not a proper comparison, is Jim Majors made a statement about, they were talking about Christianity, and he made a statement of a set of beliefs that a Christian, from his view, right, a Christian has to affirm. And the thing is it wasn't necessarily that he was 100% wrong about the statements, because Christianity is known. You can say what Christianity is. Anyone can, because it's a confessional belief and it's known. It has a defined sets of beliefs. That's fine. But the way it was put was, it wasn't just a set of beliefs that he stated. It's a set of beliefs with an interpretation. And then SJ is supposed to take his parameters that he's defined of it and defend it.
You there, Ron?
Yeah, I had a dog barking in the background. But so basically, I can't remember exactly, but Jim Majors is basically using a certain definition of Christian doctrines to define the foundational set of beliefs of Christianity. And he's using language of like penal substitutionary atonement, right? And so he's defining the parameters of the faith that SJ is supposed to defend, right? And it's like, and you get this a lot when you interact, a believer interacts with a non-believer. It's like they set the parameters of the conversation, and we have to stay inside that parameter. And it's like,
a lot just to jump in, a lot of them atheists, Jim Majors type, they were Christians. They were like probably
Yeah.
fundamentalist Christians who
largely.
Largely, like most of these activists on Twitter, all of them, like Paul Ogier, used to be a young Earth creationist, fundamentalist. So when you come from that world, you're not going to want to hear other arguments of Christianity that actually this can be adapted. That they all target what they used to believe and insist that is very dogmatically insist this is the only truth.
Yeah.
This is Christianity, what I'm saying, and not accept any wiggle room.
And what's the irony of that is they've already rejected it, but now I've got to believe it, right? But you're forcing me to argue from that, and it's like, well, here's the thing though, I don't believe in it either, so why do I have to argue from it?
Yeah.
So, and it got me thinking. Well, so Jim sets forth a set of beliefs and what they mean. Okay, he's adding his interpretation to the set of beliefs, right? And then SJ is supposed to defend all that. Well, what if SJ doesn't actually believe the interpretations that you're already setting forth that she must argue from, the parameters, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a Christian, a lot of times they will try to box you into a fundamentalist view or young earth creationist view and say you got to defend this. And it's like, does the person who is the confessing Christian get to define their faith and then communicate why they believe what they believe? Or do I have to fit in your box and then defend something I don't necessarily believe?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because I'm very vocally against penal substitutionary atonement. But for instance, what happens all the time is a challenge will be put to the Christian and say, I'm talking to some atheist and they're like, well, you believe this, and then they use penal substitutionary atonement and now you defend it, and it's like, I don't believe that. Right? You're making me defend penal substitutionary atonement, but I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
That sort of idea, right? It's like the non-believer sets the parameters for the believer, and then the believer's supposed to defend those parameters, and it's like, do I get to define my own faith? That's the question. But often that's not the case, right? In these conversations, I'm supposed to defend what you define as a Christian.
Yeah.
But I can't do that because I can defend myself or my own beliefs. And yes, there is a certain set of definable beliefs of Christianity that you can have a fair conversation about. But it just kind of struck me the way that went in that conversation, because it's so Jim sets forth these parameters and an interpretation for those parameters and what they mean, and then says, well, you defend that. And Steve, he agrees with Jim, and then they're like, well, you defend that, SJ. And it's like, who gets to define their Christian belief? The non-believer or the one who believes?
Yeah.
And if we're having a good faith conversation, then I get to, as the believer, define my faith, define what my set of beliefs are. And by the same account, I'm okay with the atheist defining their beliefs, okay? We all too often get in this, well, you're an atheist, so you believe this, or you're a Christian and you believe that. And we don't hear each other. And then, like Aaron Raw gets up there and spits about what faith is and must be. And then the Christian's like, well, that's not faith. And he's like, you're a liar. Yes, it is. It's like, who gets to define it? Okay? Does the person who doesn't believe get to define the one for the believer? And then, okay, if so, does the believer get to define atheism for the non-believer, right? I mean, or do both get to define their parameters? That's my own point,
And that's
do I get to define my... Yeah. Can I define my own parameters and then argue from that? Or must I sit in your arbitrary box and then defend something I don't actually necessarily believe?
Exactly. And that's the fairest way to do it. And that's how it should always be in a dialogue like that. And let both sides just be open and So this is what I hold to, and invite questions instead of being pushed into defending a certain topic, certain thing you don't hold. Completely agree.
And then, of course, oftentimes another problem that arises. It's like, especially with the atheism versus Christianity, which is a non-proper comparison, right? Is the atheist doesn't have to compare or defend a position like from a specific group. Like, you're not allowed to say, well, the USSR is atheistic and therefore atheism leads to the USSR and the gulags. But they can say, well, you're a Christian, so you're guilty of all Christian atrocities ever perpetrated by every single Christian ever throughout history. Now defend yourself. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I didn't agree with what the Christians there did, but you're a Christian, so you defend it. And it's like, but I didn't agree.
Yeah,
so there's that imbalance of the conversation, and I'm for not whitewashing anything. I struggle with all these difficult passages of the Bible, or what Christians have done throughout history that were wrong. But I don't have to answer every single question for every single Christian who's ever lived throughout all of history and done something.
Yeah.
Just like, well, anyways, you got anything? I'm talking a lot.
No, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. We're covering good top, and it's I'm agreeing with all your points, and it's not much else to add on that side of it for that section. Beforehand, you mentioned about when I'm just trying to find it quickly on Twitter when I commented, I quote tweeted Jim Majors, and then you commented after it just before we went on air.
Oh yeah,
that's quite a cool bit to go back to. Sort of. Let me try and find it. Yeah, so Jim Majors put basically Alvin Plantinga, I don't know of an argument for Christian belief that seems very likely to convince one who doesn't already accept its conclusion. Now, me and you both briefly spoke about saying, well, we were both atheist agnostics, and then you had like a bit of pagan history, I remember, but we come to Christianity in like against what that's saying. So there was arguments. I had religious experiences which led me to the conviction as well, but also the argumentation was there pretty early on. Like, I was quite influenced by William Lane Craig pretty early on, and some of Jordan Peterson's stuff when he was pushing back against atheism. So if you call that apologetics and argumentation for theism and God and Christianity, then of course I go against what Plantinga means there. But as I point out, Plantinga is known for warranted Christian belief, like Reformed epistemology. So he's known for the natural thing. He doesn't want to argue natural theology like Trent Horn or other guys will want to do. He'll want to just justify belief because it's a justifiable belief naturally. You don't need to argue with it. So that's what Plantinga is sort of getting at, even though he does touch on theology, natural theology in other sections. So I then copied back basically with Graham Oakley, who's a leading atheist philosopher. I've considered and rejected most forms of arguments for atheism. I do not accept that atheism is the default position, etc. So you come down a bit later. Yeah, that was basically just firing back saying, look, we can play top philosopher quote fields all day long, but we're not going to get anywhere. It's just we can all take a quote from Plantinga and Opie and prove a point we want to prove. So that was my point on that. Your point was more general, like what you said, right? As my pinned tweet clearly states, in my journey, at many points, my expectations and presuppositions were violated by the information. I was not predisposed to the argument in a particular subset. Yeah, I was not predisposed to the argument.
Yeah.
So we can talk a bit about that.
And what you see a lot of times, especially be clear, we're talking about a specific subset of people who call themselves atheists, and they're anti-theist is more accurate probably, and they conduct themselves a specific way. I'm not saying all non-believers are this way or all atheists are this way. I'm talking about a specific particular subset who happen to be atheistic and generally activist atheists, and they are very vocally targeting believers and such. Okay, so not everyone, but
Make that clear.
yeah, like Apologia had a tweet recently, and it basically was a common tweet that you run across, and it said basically apologetics has never convinced anyone who wasn't already convinced, right? That and that's clearly false. And that's what I made the comment to Apologia's tweet. It's like, that's clearly false because I didn't believe before. Apologetics helped me along in my journey, and they did. And no, apologetics didn't get me 100% to being a confessing Christian. I did have spiritual experiences that put the topping on that cake, but that cake was built up along the way by apologetics. And that's, I have a series of pinned tweet because I got a lot of questions from particularly atheists about, I was often accused of being indoctrinated, or I only believe because I was indoctrinated, or whatnot. And it's like, I became a believer at 38 years old. I wasn't indoctrinated. A lot of assumptions about who I am because I'm a Christian was thrown at me, right? And so, in order to help, theoretically help that not be the case all the time, I did this long 20 tweet, pinned tweet about my journey to faith. Apologetics does work. It does help. It helped. I mean, I say help. That's not what I mean. It's the wrong word. It matters.
I know what you mean. Definitely. Yeah.
I don't have to. But anyways, the point that I get thrown at me a lot is I only believe because I was doing. I can't think of the word still. A biased reasoning, right? I was trying to find reasons to believe what I already believed. And it's like, no, as I'm saying in my pinned tweet series, clearly, that as I'm doing these studies, the information I'm receiving is actually contrary to what I currently believed was true, and it's changing my mind.
Yeah.
But there's a common refrain that apologetics only appeals to those who already believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, this whole you choose, you're desperate for Christianity to be true. So the thing is, the Christian life isn't like what Joel Osteen makes it out, where it's just going to be positive and you're going to get money. And the Christian life is hard. Like you're in a fight against the flesh. You're struggling against your past self, and I've experienced that. I've been a Christian fully for only 3 years, and my past self is still there, and it's daily. You're learning, you're growing as a Christian, and slowly I'm transforming, and I believe I am transforming better. But my old sins, my old man, the flesh is still there, in the sense that I grew up like without any of this. It would be easier to be my old agnostic self, not caring and going out drunk or do whatever I want to do, have no care in the world, and no one's watching me. I'm my own boss. You know what I'm saying? And it just, so this whole, oh, you're only doing it because it'll benefit you, and but it doesn't really, does it? It right here and now. But I do it because I genuinely believe it's true. I've had experiences in it, and I love God, and I'm growing in my relationship with Him. But it's not easy, and that's the part where atheists just completely neglect that side of things. I feel a lot of them do. Again, I'm not painting a broad brush over all atheism, but just that
Yeah.
subsection.
Well, and that's something that I greatly desire to get past, is this casual dismissal stuff. It's like, well, you don't, the atheist saying, well, you only believe because you want to believe, or faith is belief contrary to evidence. And it's like, no, that's not faith. Can I please define faith, because I'm the one who believes in it, right? So if you'll just extend that to me, that'd be great. and can we get away from lobbing just all of these silly grenades? Like, some Christians will say, you're just an atheist because you want to play with yourself, and it's like, stop it. Okay, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
But and that's what I take objection to, because if we're going to interact with people, we need to see them as individuals and have conversations.
Absolutely.
Right. And I post a quote from Jordan Peterson. I think you saw it. And I think it's devastatingly accurate. It's like how do you put it? I'm going to mess up the quote, but the absolute, I'm totally messing it up. It's like, great dialogue is a medicine, or it takes away the absolute drudgery of our temporal morality. If we have great dialogue, it lifts us up, transcends us past this temporary mortal coil, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's great. And let's have dialogue. That's what I want. I don't. If you just want to lob grenades at each other, then that's not even high school. That's elementary school playground stuff. And it's like, stop it. Let's do something else.
So is that what you're thinking, like with the channel again in season 2 now? You're going to have more atheists on, and people who might have a different sort of belief system and worldview to you. Is that what you're aiming at, Ron?
I'm hoping to. Say, my first 5 videos, I had 3 Christians and 2 non-Christians, and of course, it's going to probably be easier for me to find Christians to talk to, because that's my circle.
Yeah.
But I want to have others, non-Christians on, or, and this is often used as a criticism of Christianity, but there's a lot of different variants in Christianity. So I can have people, fellow Christians, who I have some significant different ideals, But yeah, I want to try and have more different beliefs than myself on, and just have conversations. I have one person who describes himself as an atheist, and we're going to talk next week. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to that.
I'll be checking.
But of course, we always start with the people we know. And so the first 5 episodes are all people I already knew. And so is this, of course. But next week, I don't necessarily know this person, but we're going to try and have a good faith conversation about whatever comes up. But they describe themselves as an atheist and a former Christian. So I just want to have conversations and good faith dialogue. An interaction with an individual, a person who I don't straw man, and who doesn't straw man me. And, really good faith conversation, all that really means is you assume the most charitable meaning of what I say. I'll assume the most charitable meaning of what you say. And we'll ask clarifying questions of what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't just assume what they're saying and then attack that. It's not. I'm not even wanting. I don't want debates. I just want to have a conversation, and let our beliefs interact with each other. All right. That's my goal with the channel.
No, that's a great goal. That's like, as we touched on at the start, that's saying my goal on Twitter is over the years, and especially now, my goal is to have a better conversation. If I get dragged into tweets, I want it to uplift the conversation and try and understand the other view as much as I can. And yeah, I'm not looking for the dumpster truck, like the fires anymore on Twitter. If I'm generally going to comment, I think it's worthwhile. And sometimes I tweet stuff and I get comments, and I quite often tend to ignore, because I've learned to just ignore. Sometimes you kick the atheist hornet net, so to speak, nest, so to speak. And I look at my phone and I've got about 40 messages, and I thought, oh no, that normally means one of the more popular atheists has wrote something, and then all the others have swarmed in. But
Yeah.
I pick and choose now when to comment back and when, because I've got a good sense where I think will be a good conversation. If I feel I can learn from anyone, Muslim, atheist, I will have that conversation. But if I feel there's going to be no fruitfulness in it, I'll just avoid it now. I don't go looking for it at all. Unless I'm having a bad day, I just decide to buy it.
Well, sometimes we like to kick a can, but the thing about kicking a can is it does roll down the road a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It starts to take a little life of its own, and then you've got 40 people who are commenting on you, and you're like, why did I start this again? And that was stupid. but no, I've actually been interacting more with atheists, and I felt that I've done well recently on Twitter, and that's what I want to do. I don't want these stupid conversations. I don't want these stupid back and forth and insults and stuff. And it was interesting because I commented about that non sequitur show debate with the SJ and Craig Reed and Jim Majors have been on. Jim Majors, and there was a bit of a conversation that developed from that, and there was this one atheist that came in and is like, "Prove you're God," and it's like, who's talking about that? We're talking about whether atheist and Christianity is a proper comparison in specific regard to what this debate was about. And admittedly, I did not link the video at the very openings, which I should have. Obviously, for various reasons. For one, to set up the context, and two, I should have shared it just in general, right? But me and several atheists had already had some interactions, and they were fairly good. And then this one this activist, anti-theist that type of person comes in, and it's like, they just bust in the door, and it's like, prove that your God is real. Are you going to defend Christianity? And it's like, nobody's talking about this. What are you doing? And then me and these atheists, a couple of atheists, actually point this out to this person. We're agreeing because no one was talking about that. And then as evidence that was the conversation, because we're all like, that's not even the conversation we're having. Why are you doing this? They quote tweet themselves where they introduced it into the conversation, and it's like, okay, that's enough. See, this is the conversation. It's like, no, you introduced that. No one was talking about that. And it's like, defend your God. And it's like, that's not the conversation we're having. And I don't have to just do that at every time someone shows up. I'm having a specific conversation, and I want to focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing about conversation is we have an obligation, if we want to have a conversation with somebody, we have an obligation to convince them to have that conversation with us. We don't get to just show up and say, you have this conversation with me and defend your position. And it's like, maybe I don't want to, and you're not giving me any reasons.
Yeah. Defend your God, yeah. That's quite...
But that's the kind of stuff I don't want, and the point I was getting at is I felt like I handled myself well, and they wanted to say, well, I have to defend my position. They didn't quote it, but you've got 1 Peter 3:15,
I was just about to say that. I was
Yeah,
just about to say
or
that.
apology.
But
And
they love it.
atheists like to throw that.
Go on. First Peter 3,
They,
15. You must answer me. Give me your proof.
yeah,
It's just
you have to. You know, you're my slave. See, it says, and it's like, no, it doesn't say that. But because what it also, you know, Jesus and I used this with that person, and of course they interpreted it the worst possible way, right? They were basically, they didn't quote 1 Peter 3:15, but they basically were kind of referencing that idea that I have to defend myself, my belief. And then I was like, well, don't forget, you know, there's also the passage about don't throw pearls, right? And I left it there. I did the ... because obviously it goes on. And most everyone knows what that means, right? That the statement is don't throw pearls before swines, right? Well, what do? Well, I just say don't throw pearls, right? And why did I leave off swine? Because I wasn't being provocative. I wasn't trying to be provocative or insulting. Okay? And I know how this passage is often taken, and that's exactly what they do. It's like, why are you insulting me? Yeah, that's a great Christian witness. And like, I didn't insult him. Like, yeah, you did. You just called me swine. And I'm like, no, I didn't. The parable is about if someone will not receive what you have to give, do not continue to throw it at them. It's not about calling people swine. You know, it's not talking about. It's like that's the parable. The parable is if someone will not receive what you've got to offer them, do not continue to subject yourself to offering it to them.
Yeah.
And that was my point. And I specifically left off the swine part because I wasn't trying to be insulting. I wasn't trying to be provocative. But of course they went there because they took the worst possible.
Then people, they want that. They want to get a reaction out of a Christian and take it to that extreme. That's what they're looking for. When they come in storming in like that, prove your God. They're trying to rattle you to say something or push you back somewhere. They want an argument. So
yeah.
I tend to try and ignore that now. But
yeah, and they want you to react in such a way that they can quote tweet you and say, "Here's this great Christian who's being insulting and what a great witness, and this is why everyone hates Christians." It's like, well, the reason why I left off "Don't throw your pearls before swine" is I wasn't trying to be insulting, and I didn't want to insult anybody, and I wasn't trying to be provocative. But of course, their very next reply is, "Oh yeah, sure, you're going to turn to insults now." And it's like, I didn't insult you. I never have. I didn't throughout the whole thing. And you're like, yeah, you did. You just called me swine. So I was like, no, I didn't. I left it off because I wasn't trying to insult you or call you swine. And that's how that passage is often taken. But it means do not continue to offer what you have to people who will not receive it. That's what it means. It's a parable.
Yeah.
And then so it's like, I didn't insult you. I never did, and I never did. I didn't attack him. I didn't insult him because, you know, that doesn't help, and I'm not supposed to. I'm told not to. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's an example of bad faith. Is they took exactly what I said and interpreted it in the worst possible way, and then accused me of what I meant instead of asking for. And then, of course, when I told them that, they rejected that too. And it's like, no, you insulted me. And like, I didn't. And you know what? At this point, I'm going to knock the dust off my feet. Right? Yeah. Another reason why you don't have to always subject yourself to this verse 3:15, where you have to give a defense, is because Jesus also tells them if they won't receive, then knock the dust off your heels and leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
But and so you don't have to do that. No one does. You don't. If you want to have a conversation or if you want someone to interact with you, you are obligated to give them a reason to do so.
Yeah. Definitely. 100% agree. 100%.
And yes, I know that there are Christians who are trying to think of a good word, they're not, they don't conduct themselves well. Okay, they insult people and they're very fighty, you know, and they don't do that. Please, Christians, stop. It's not helpful to anyone. There's a song recently that I've really gotten into. It's a rap song, Christian rap song, by a person, Chris Tungray, and it's called "Stop Me," and it's a great example of that because it's like he's talking about the only people who.
Ron? Ron? Ron, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you hear me?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
you
we
just
had,
cut-
yeah, we had it cut out there for a moment. But anyways, the whole point is, yeah, it's called "Stop Me." It's like, Lord, stop me if I'm acting wrong, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't just, you know, as Jesus says, if you only love those who love you, then you're no better
You're no better
Yeah.
than you're
than the pagans who already do that. And it's like, and then, well, obviously, there's multiple passages of pray for your enemy and those who persecute you.
yeah.
So remember that always, you know. And there's another song, Christian rap song, that I've gotten into in that regard. It's called "Check Your Heart," and it's very good. It talks about being fake on social media and, you know, having a proper motivation. And every one of us goes through those phases, especially new converts to any ideology.
Yeah.
Right? Like the cage stage Calvinist, you know, or the ortho bro who just became Orthodox, or
Yeah.
even just someone who generally became Christian, or suddenly, or not suddenly, but someone who just became non-Christian, an atheist. We all immediately want to jump out there with our new belief, and even though we were wrong previously for probably a couple decades, we know we're right now. So let's jump out there and prove it to everyone, right?
And that's what I said when I first joined Twitter. I was kind of like that. I was just right. I watched a bit of Capturing Christianity and these apologetics because I'm getting at these atheists now. It was like for a little while I was like that, and I thought, "Dang, slow down." it took a little while of training and learning, and even I admit I fell into that at the start, and
I have to.
Yeah.
But what I was pleased with is my recent interactions weren't like that, and it's like, okay, maybe I can get back to doing this because I really want to do this. Because
I think next time you have a interaction with the atheists, I'm going to be following your feed, and I'm going to jump in and see if we can both calmly have a nice conversation with a few of them. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, but so I was like that before. I've done that myself. I've purposely trolled and tried to get reactions and been provocative. So I try not to do that anymore. My recent interactions, I thought, at least from my position, went well. You know, that is something too, is we do need to defend our faith. We should. We should be able to. But the Lord doesn't need us to fight his battles, right? He fights our battles, not us fight his battles. And we're giving the ministry of reconciliation, not a declaration of war against people. You know? And I think we forget that. We are given a ministry to be reconciled to God, not to wage war on people. Although Ephesians 6 tells us there is a war, but it's not against flesh and blood. And then Paul tells us in Romans 12 is as much as it is to do as much as you are able, as much as it depends on you, be peaceable with all people.
Yeah.
And so those are things I'm taking very, very serious now.
Absolutely. And that's the best way. That is the Christian way. That's what we
Yeah.
have to ideal to and follow. Can I?
And
So-
another one that's been really on my mind in that regard too is from I think it's Second Corinthians 9. It's at the end of the chapter. It's either First or Second Corinthians, but it says basically it's where he's talking about, to run. It's one of the references to running the race, or don't you know that anyone who trains for the race goes into strict training, but they're doing it for a temporary crown. So how much more should we be going into strict training to win the eternal crown?
Yes.
And he talks about, I strike a blow against my body to make it obedient. But at the last verse, he says, making sure that it basically says, I need to conduct myself where I don't undo my own ministry. Right? He's like, Paul's aware of if he preaches this message, but then he turns around and his own personal credibility is destroyed, then everything he's just preached is destroyed.
Because if you're not living out the Christian lifestyle in front of your hometown community and friends, if you're still living a sinful way or doing things wrong, you're not being an example, which you need to be. You could potentially turn someone away from Christ by the way you're acting. So that's heavy on my mind, because where I work is at the university, which is heavy atheistic. It's like very secular. They don't want to talk about religion. It's complete opposite, basically, political correctness, etc. And they know I'm a Christian, but if we don't have them conversations, that's work, and I understand that, and that's fine. I don't push my faith on people. I'm not going around. I'm there for work. I understand that it's not sort of there. But what my view is, if I live out the Christian ideal, if I live a good lifestyle there, I show them my work ethic, my not swearing, not acting a certain way, not acting vile or speaking vile as some workers might, but just trying to live, like you said, preparing for the eternal crown, but being a light, being a shining light, and then it might help them, and then I could have it where they might come to me and ask, and sometimes they do, about, oh, you go to church, Dean, don't you? What's this? And that could lead away, and it's heavy on my mind, because even though I can't really have the conversations, if I act a certain way, they might privately come to me, the guys who work for me and the teachers and people around there. So that's quite a heavy. Apologetics and Christian evangelism isn't just me going out and shouting the gospel, John 3:16. It's the way we live. It's the way we act. People are watching that more than what we're saying. If anything, it's a whole lifestyle.
I think evangelism is 9 times out of 10 going to be how you live and treat others.
Exactly, and it does apply.
And it applies to Twitter too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have all sorts of scriptural commands about that, not just the ones I've cited, right? But like I said, at the end of that, I think it's 2 Corinthians 9. I probably could look it up quickly, but Paul says, once I have, since I've preached, do not let myself suddenly do not let myself undo what I've preached by my own actions, basically, and we need to be aware of that. Sometimes as Christians, we represent Christ to others, and sometimes we have to re-present Christ to others, right? Mm-hmm. Some people who were Christians and then became not Christian, and it's not that I'm gonna be clear, I'm not in this channel, I'm not evangelizing, I'm not trying to convert people, I'm just having conversations, but sometimes we need to re-present Christ to people because of others, they've been abused by people in church, or they've been hurt by people in church, or what they just fell away from what they believed or was taught. And I mentioned this under Sygart's post recently, and I was thinking about this recently too, is, there was a time when I would say, even though I thought myself an atheist, I set myself up as God's enemy, capital G God, right? Especially particularly the Christian God. What I thought I knew of the Christian God, and I can still be an atheist and do that because I was opposed to the ideal of God and the people who believed in that ideal.
Yeah.
And I did embrace darkness. And my point isn't that I was an immoral person or I was a horrible person or, I lacked all morality or ethics. I was a decent person. I was an honest person. I didn't steal, or I didn't do, I didn't rape people or whatever, It's not that I'm not saying that I was a completely immoral person, unethical. It wasn't that, but I did embrace darkness against the Lord, against the light. And I rejected the ideal as I knew it. But here's the thing, is I was greatly ignorant of the thing that I rejected. But I didn't know I was ignorant of it.
Yeah.
And some of that is because of bad representations.
Yeah. I can imagine, yeah. Just to stop, I only got about 10 more minutes, Ron, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I've got to eat something and then get ready with the wife's getting ready, so.
Yeah.
But, yeah, one thing, slightly off topic, but it's on my mind because I had Bible study yesterday and John 6 was discussed, and I just thought I'd run it because it's on my mind because it's an incredible link. Like, so there was the two feedings. In John 6 is the feeding of the 5,000, but in some of the other Gospels there's also the feeding of the 4,000. And I've never made the link, the significance of the two different feedings. So in one of the guys had like a John commentary, and he explained it. And so the feeding of the 5,000 is 5 loaves of fish, and you get 12 baskets of crumbs at the end of leftovers. So that was in a Jewish area on the Sea of Galilee. So the 5 symbolized like the Torah, so the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, and the 12 was the 12 tribes of Israel. So it was very Jewish specific. So there's theological meaning behind the numbers sort of in there. When he went across the lake and taught, it was more of like a Gentile region with the 4,000. So, but the number of fish and the number of leftover baskets was 7 both times. Now 7 in Hebrew and across the world at that time, pagan world, 7 was known as like creation, completion.
So the divine completion, yeah.
So the way they've tied it in was Jesus first went to the Jews and had that link, and then when he went across later and done the other, it wasn't just a random second feeding. It was showing he's gone to the Gentiles for the completion. So it just moved me a lot because it was the thread, and they're separate. Got like John doesn't have both the feedings in it, but what they're saying when you read the 4 Gospels, there's so many little loose ends and so many numbers like that where it just I'm always learning, and it's just I'm finding this constantly, and it's such a blessing because little things like that, and there's other symbolic stuff with numbers, and the way it ties into the Old Testament constantly. Even Jesus walking on water was explained about how Yahweh could control the seas, and it's foreshadowing Christ, and obviously Moses parting through the Red Sea and Christ walking on the. It's just incredible, and when I have these conversations with atheists, and it was like, oh, the Gospels were clearly fabricated 100 years later by these people, and I was like, no, you don't get it. Like, it's so. If anyone fabricated it, they're geniuses beyond what you can even comprehend. Because I even hear Jordan Peterson when he talked about the snake and Moses, and which I don't know if you said you watched the podcast. I haven't seen it, but I've seen certain clips. But when he's going over the snake, and then he's going over Jesus will be lifted up, and he said his sin, darkness, is death, resurrection, and it's just tying it in, and it's just, Jordan's even going, this is either insane or it's true, because there's no other option. He said, look at it. This is truth from 3,000 years ago. Whatever way you want to look, this isn't just shepherds sitting there in a field like farmers, what they say, making up stories. This is so real. it's undeniably real when you look into it, and it's I just
Yeah,
wanted to
and
bring that up.
there's a great deal of work on it. Is undesigned coincidences in the Gospels, right?
McGrew.
And yeah, Lydia McGrew is a big one on
Yeah.
that. Is it Timothy McGrew as well?
Her husband, yeah, I think they both
Yeah.
wrote on that. I haven't
Yeah,
read either book, but
I believe
heard
so.
they were-
Eric Manning, he has that Testify channel. He brings a lot of this together. I recommend his channel, Testify, is
I've
what's
watched
called.
it. It's brilliant. Yeah.
He does a lot with the McGrews. And it's pretty fascinating. And the McGrews ain't the only ones. I've got a book about undesigned coincidences, an ebook. I haven't gotten to reading it, but there's a lot of those in the Gospels. You know, people want to often bang on about contradictions in the Gospels, but there's a lot to be said that those aren't actual contradictions.
Yeah.
And there's reason to say that. There's not just I'm blind to it.
You just
But,
can't accept it.
Yeah. But there's a lot of undesigned coincidences. But that's what you just said about John 6 and the feeding of the 5 and the 4,000. That's not something I actually had put together or come across, and that's certainly fascinating.
Yeah. Look
and that's
because it's amazing.
And that's the thing about the Bible is it is in such a way that the most unlearned can comprehend something of it, and the most learned can't exhaust it.
No. Did you wrote
And that alone,
Yeah.
huh?
I think you
But that
wrote
alone,
Yeah.
yeah, I did write that recently in one
Yeah, I
of your
love that. Yeah,
underneath.
you wrote it to my tweet about
Yeah.
St. Augustine quote. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's one of the reasons I say the Bible is divine. Is how can this thing that stretches over this amount of time come together in any sort of coherence? Which it does if you want to study it in good faith. And that's what I did whenever read the Bible and let it talk for itself, and then assume that it actually makes sense and figure out if you can make sense of it.
Yeah.
Right? Don't just read it and say, well, that makes no sense, and throw it on the bed. You know? That's not investigation.
Yeah.
If you want to investigate something, you would assume that the person who has produced it is not just incompetent and has something to say, and you'll see if you can make it make sense. And then you still manned it, and then you can either reject it or accept it or whatever.
Absolutely.
But if you just read it one time and go, that makes no sense, that's impossible, you're not actually engaging with it.
Yeah.
But you're probably about out of time, ain't you? And
Yeah.
Anyways.
Can we wrap up for a couple of minutes?
yeah,
No,
we'll do
quite-
that.
We've covered quite a lot. It's been brilliant, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'd always love to come back on and just keep chatting. Obviously, whenever we're on, and yeah, I think you're doing a great thing with this channel, and I hope, like you said, you got the atheist next week. I hope that's a fruitful conversation. I'll pray for that.
Yeah.
And thank you again for having me on. It's a privilege.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it. I want to really commit to doing this, and like I said, I think I've experienced myself being in the proper place for it. And I do want to talk to people who are non-Christian and have good faith conversations. That's my whole point. Because I can't remember who exactly said this, but it's a basic idea. If we refuse to engage in good faith dialogue and have conversations, what does that leave us?
Yeah.
In to reconcile. I mean, we can reconcile through dialogue, and down the road somewhere violence happens. So right. So
right.
let's do the dialogue thing. Let's have good faith conversations, and let's avoid the catastrophes that can be avoided.
Yeah. So thank you, Ron. And
Yep. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you came on. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We'll catch you around the Twitter sphere and all that.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do something more. Hopefully,
hope
of course, there's a considerable time difference between us being in London and me being in central of the United States.
Yeah. That's the only
But
challenge.
we got it together this time, and that's great.
Thank you so much.
So, do you have anything to promote that you're doing?
No. Just go follow me on London Fierce Twitter, and if you want,
Yeah.
and that's it. And follow. Ron,
Oh, and
please.
one last thing.
Twitter.
Yeah, one last thing is, if you want to study the best that Christianity has to offer, you owe it to yourself to read the Church Fathers.
Yeah.
But
agree.
anyway, and I'm not an Eastern Orthodox confessing Christian. I'm a Pentecostal charismatic who tends Eastern. But we'll see you around, Dean. Thanks for coming on, and I loved it.
Yeah, loved it too, Ron. Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless.